we're coming to section 5, fun section. Here's where we're going to get responsive, and we're going to change some elements, add some elements, and learn some new traits. Now in this section, we're primarily going to be focusing on upgrading our CSS3 elements and our HTML5 elements. During this video, CSS3 and HTML5, the headers. Now that we have our HTML5 header set up, now it's time to go back and reconfigure that header element so that we have the company's name is going to be on the left hand side, and we have our menu is going to be nested on the right hand side. Now to perform this task, we're going to be using HTML5, and then we're going to go source up some of our CSS3 magic, thus creating the visual layout and paving the way for our responsiveness. Alrighty, so here's our header. We have our unordered list. We have our site's name right here. What we want to do now is we want to make it to where this is actually lined up so we have about, contact, and services. And we want that listed right here. And then we want this right here. We're actually going to turn this into a hyperlink to always go to index.html, which is this home page right here. And we can do that by doing a few different tricks, upgrades to our HTML5 tag, but a lot of it has to do with our CSS3. Alrighty, so coming into our Atom editor, one of the first things that I want to do right quick is inside of our head element, I want to drop down. Now I want to create my site's title right quick. Take about just a second. We can call our title function, and we can set the title. What this does is it allows us to put a specific name right here in the browser's tab bar. In my case, it's going to be Loves PC Repair. And we close that off. Alrighty. So now what I want to do is I want to start my meta tags. I'm not going to do all my meta tags. I'm just going to do the one that I need the most. The one that I need the most in here is going to be my viewport meta tag. So if I come over here, I do meta, and then I give it the name. So if I name this viewport, this is saying, what this is doing now is it's telling the browser, hey, I've got a meta tag, you need to come look at it. We're calling it a viewport. Now, inside here, I'm going to set content. Now, the content is kind of like your paragraph. Okay, so we've called the name is the view. We've called a paragraph, which is the meta. We've given it an ID or class, which is our name, and then we're going to give it some content, which is like Loves PC Repair, whatever else like that. However, we're going to do some math. So the first thing we want to do is we want to do width. Now we're going to call the width functionality, and we're going to do device minus width, and then we're going to set our maximum dash scale. Scale is equal to 1. Basically what we just did here was we called the width. We did the width mathematics. So we're doing the device screen size minus the width, and then we're going to set the maximum scale to 1. Alright. So in order to upgrade our header element to be responsive and have that same layout that we desire, let's go ahead and start off with our main one right here, and that's going to be this right here. We want to convert this to a hyperlink. So let's go ahead and create our hyperlink right now. Let's do aref index.html. Alright, so we got our index.html set up. We're going to go ahead and give this an ID. So we're going to give this ID of a logo because technically, well, that's what it is. It's our site's logo. Now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and give it the name. So we can do Loves PC Repair. Close that off. Now if you wanted to, the company you're representing, or you, if you want to do an image, you can do image source img bnr.jpg. It'd act the exact same way. Alrighty. Now that we have this is not needed. So let's go ahead and take that out of there. Now, one thing I do want to do right quick is I want to add 2 elements into this. And the first one is going to be our nav. So right now, if we set our nav element setup, this is going to be like our navigation. It's going to help us when we get ready to do our CSS elements. Now inside here, I'm going to create a new hyperlink. It's going to be a ref pound. And what that pound does is it acts as a refresher. So it's not really going to do anything except for, well, it's really technically not going to do anything until we tell it to do something in our CSS. So we're going to give it an ID, and we're going to set this ID to menu icon, because that's exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be our menu icon. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use basically HTML alt codes, and I'm going to create the 3 vertical lines. And I'm going to do that by doing and pound 9776 colon. And I'm going to close off my href. Now I'm a little weird with this, but I've got to have everything lined up. So now let's come down here and let's close off our nav. So right now what we have is we have our class of buttons. And they look okay. I mean, personally, the ones that I specifically set up looks like crap. I'll be honest with you, it does. But I don't want my buttons like that anymore. I am actually going to create this class. I'm going to rename this to current, and then I'm going to delete these classes right here. Now, since this is going to be acting as the current, which will have different color, font size, and background. That way, whenever somebody's looking at the menu, they can see that the font's going to be a little bit bigger, the font's going to be a different color, and the background's going to be different. So, since this is the home page, we're going to go ahead and change this to home, and I'm going to set this to index. Now, that just completely took away my about page. So let's add that in right quick. Alrighty, so now I have this set up. My header looks really great on my HTML5 aspect. Now it's time to do the brain work in CSS. So open up your GUI CSS file. Now the first thing we want to do is this right here is everything we have for our header attributes. Delete it, don't need it. Let's go ahead and take this time to go ahead and delete anything and everything we're not going to be using. For example, I know I'm not going to be using these buttons, so let's delete those. I want to keep my video in there. I'm not using my triangle. I'm not using my circle. Let's keep that image circle in. I might use it. Dot blue. I might be using that one. Title. I don't know. I don't think I'm using either of those either. So let's take those out. Wait a minute. I am using my title. Am I using my dot blue? Image class circle. So here's that image, this big old huge image right here. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and take that out for right now because what we're fixing to be doing in our body element is going to be really awesome. We won't need that. So, nope, don't need anything else. So take this out. Alrighty, so now what we have inside of our CSS sheet, so we've got our body attribute, we have our headings, we have our image circle, which we can go ahead and take that out. So all we have is just our body, our headings, and our video. Let's go ahead and create our header class. So inside of here, we're still going to use the same background. Background RGBA 0.6. Now, what I want to do here is I want to set the width of my header. So I can do that by calling my width to 100%. Now I'm going to go ahead and set the height. So if I set my height to 90 pixels, that should be way more than enough that I need for a default header, especially for something as simple as hosting a site icon as well as the site's main navigation bar. Now what I want this to do is I want this to nest right there at the very top of the page. So I'm going to put 0. I also want to be at I want to nest it right left side of the page. So if I do left 0, this means it's going to start from the top left 0 pixels. Now what I want to do is I want to give it a little bit of styling. I'm going to just create a bottom border. That way when people are viewing the site, they can see, okay, well here's a header, here's a line separator. So it's going to act more of a line separator than it is a border element. So we're going to do border bottom. I'm going to set mine to 5 pixels. Set it to solid. I'm going to give it kind of like a grayish color. And I believe that code is going to be F0, F0, F0. If it's not that, then it's 0, F0, F0, F. But we'll get to that later. Now, I'm going to set a specific attribute in here that will allow the content to flow perfectly smoothly behind the header instead of it getting mixed up inside the header. And I can do that by calling my Z index to 100. Now, if we have any special like headers or paragraph statements inside our header, let's go ahead and set that default color and just go ahead and call that green. Now, I'm going to utilize default CSS3 font family. So if I do font family, I'm going to do mine as fantasy. I'm not going to pull anything from Google or anything like that. I'm just going to use what CSS already has built inside of it. And then finally what I want to do is I want to set my font size. I'm going to set this to about 20 pixels, any of the default settings. Alright, now what I want to do is I want to reference my logo. So if I do pound logo, this is going to be calling my ID logo. Now the difference between doing pound versus period is the ID. You'd want to do pound for ID or period for class. And usually, 9 times out of 10, the main difference between those two is the functionalities that occurs whenever you have a media screen element to resize, reshape, or whatever else to make it responsive on multiple devices. Alrighty, so the first thing we want to do inside our logo, actually open up the brackets, we want to give this a margin. So we're going to do a margin all the way around the box to 20 pixels. We're going to make this float. Now this is a new attribute we haven't talked about, floating. We can have it float to the left, to the right, or to the center, or just don't even float at all. I want to have mine float to the left because I said I want my logo to be on the left hand side and my menu to be on the right hand side. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set my width element here. Now you can set your width and your height to whatever the pixels that you desire. So if you're creating a custom icon and you have an image and it doesn't look good at a 200 by 40, you can make it 350 by 65 or whatever it is that makes it look good on your screen. But for me, I'm going to do 200 pixels. I will set my height to 40 pixels. And for just a basic little hyperlink, that would be perfect for me. Now, what I want to do is I want to call my display attribute. And this is basically going to say, okay, how are we going to display this? Are we going to use a block? Are we going to use a grid, inline block, inline flex? I think there's inline grid. There's a few different attributes in here that we can utilize. For the purpose of this, I'm just going to call it as a block. And then last but certainly not least, I'm going to set my color. Now, for those of you that are watching and following along, what's my favorite color? Yep, green. So let's call it green. And that's all we need to do for this logo for now. Alrighty, so here's where we're going to get to very little bit tricky part. And I say this because we're dealing with our navigation bar now. So let's call our nav. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to make this on the right hand side. So I want to do the reverse effect of my float effect in my logo. So if I do float right, then it's going to be nesting on the right hand side. And then I want to give it some padding. So if I give it a padding of like 20 pixels, then that should be a decent amount where the content inside is not going to be touching the border of my navigation. Alright, so I tricked you a little bit. That's all there is to my nav bar. Now what I want to do is I'm going to come back over here and I have my menu icon. I need to do something with that. So for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set like the height, the width. I want to set the background of that, and I want to set the color of it. So if we go ahead and get started, let's go ahead and call our menu icon. I said I was going to do the background. Now that I come to think about it, I don't think I want to do the background because this background on top of if I set black transparent background on a black transparent background, this is going to be a solid black. So let's not even do the background. But let's go ahead and set our width to 40 pixels. I want to set our height to 40 pixels. Do you want to reference my color? So I'm going to do my color as blue. Now, here's where it's going to confuse you a little bit. I want to set my display to none. So if I say this right now, it'll look a little jumbled up, but that would be the menu icon. The 3 little vertical lines would not show up at all. There's a reason. Don't get too far ahead of me now. Now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and drop down and do my A, hover, pound. And this is basically saying, okay, whenever it's hovered over, then we need to do this. So let's set the background to green. Let's set our border radius to 4 pixels by 4 pixels by 0 by 0. And then finally, we're going to set our color to green just because we can. And there's that. That's all we need to do for the menu icon for now. Now let's work on our unordered list. So if we drop down here and let's create our UL element, this is where we're going to get a little tricky. If we do our list style, as you can see right here, we have a few different things we can utilize. We're going to use none. Now let me show you what list style is right quick before you start being confused and call me a weirdo. The list is these little dots right here. I don't want them. Don't need them in there. So I take them out. That's it. All we need for our unordered list. That's all we need. Now let's call our list item. This is where we're going to have some fun. We're going to call the display function on this one. And we're going to do this one as inline block. Basically where it goes vertical. I am going to float the contents inside of my list item to the left. And then finally, I'm going to give this a padding of 10 pixels. So inside of our navigation to the inside of our list item, we have a total of 30 pixel padding. So from the words or the hyperlinks we put inside of it to the outside nav box, that's 30 pixels. Should be way more than enough for what we're trying to accomplish anyway. Now I want to drop down. I want to reference my A attribute, which is, as you know, our hyperlink. I'm just going to set this color to green. That way they can see it. Otherwise, it's just the default, whatever color they have it. Alright, now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and reference my current class. Remember I told you we want to have a bit of a bigger font size, a different font color, and a different background. So I'm going to do my period current, and I will drop this down. Now inside here, let's go ahead and set that color. So all of our colors right now are green. So if I was to set mine to a blue color, I'll set my font size. I think our default font size right now is 20. So if I bump mine up to 30 px, that should be a tremendous difference. And then my background. I could do another RGBA, but it wouldn't turn out right. Like I was saying, if you have a transparent black item inside of another item that has a transparent black background, it's just going to be a solid black background. So what I want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and call a solid background, and this is going to be white. Alrighty. So now if I was to, I don't know for sure how well a blue font is going to work on a white background. Let's try it. That's one thing that coding is all about, is trying different elements to see what they look like. So if I was to save this, come over here and refresh my website, I have bottom border, I have my hyperlink icon right here. It doesn't look too bad. Could be better. And then I have my different services, my different links right here. So that is how we can get our header to look more professional, with the exception of this. But hey, we can play around the colors later. And if I click on this, it literally just refreshes the page and goes to index. So how can we make this responsive? Because if we're in Google Chrome, so if we use Control-Shift-I, this opens up our Google toolbox. We can come over here to our elements, our console, sources, whatever else we want. I'm not really focused on those. I want this button. And this allows me to view it on different devices. So I can do responsive and create my own height and width. Well, I can come down here and click S5. I can go to the 5X. I can grab a iPhone 6 Plus and just whatever I want to do with it. Scrolling up and down, you can either use your wheel or you can right click, left click, and drag it up and down. Alright, so we see inside of our header, the icon itself, the logo stays the same. The border stays the same, but my menu drops down and it's not where it's supposed to be. Let's fix that. Now we'll come back to full screen. It looks beautiful again. Alrighty, so whenever we came over here, I told you we'd set the viewport to do the width equals the device minus the width. And you would think, well, Mr. Love, doesn't that take care of it? Well, no, that just initiates the screen size and orientation. What we want to do now is we want to go ahead and call our media attribute. We can do that by doing @media. And then we can do only, this media device, only a certain object. This object's going to be the screen. And then we're going to set a AND statement. So it's going to be AND max width equals 640 pixels. you can adjust that max width to whatever you want. Some people that are really talented in CSS3, they'll have their max width set to 640, and then all of the header elements inside of that. And then if they have like another device they want to do, they'll set like only screen and max width to 320 pixels. Then they'll have the header laid out a different way for the devices that are only 320 pixels wide. It can get like really crazy and like really awesome, because the more devices that you have set this way, the different tricks and trades you can get. But if you do a default responsive, just a quick wham bam thank you, then the default is like 640 pixels, and that's typically the widest tablet. So if it'll fit on a tablet or smaller, we're going to want our header to respond this way that we're fixing to set up. So let's open up our curly brackets. And inside of here, everything we put inside of these curly brackets right here is how our different elements is going to react, specifically the header. Now, what's really great about this is we called a lot of our colors, the radius, we called the height and the width, and a lot of different stuff. So all we have to do is just kind of tell the different elements, like our header, our menu icon. We just have to tell them how to react instead of having to recreate all the color codes again. So if we set our header, we set our position of our header, we can have it set to absolute, fixed, or relative. And those are your three main ones. Fixed just tells it stay, don't move. Relative allows it to just kind of stay wherever it needs to be in that general area of where the code is. And then absolute allows it to be absolute where the code is, as well as where does it fit at on the screen. So let's do fixed actually, because I don't really want it going anywhere. I want it staying right there. I mean, it's the header. It doesn't need to go anywhere. Now let's call our menu icon. This is where we're going to be able to show the menu icon and give it the color and the width. And so we're going to do display equals inline block. We're going to set the color to blue. You don't really have to set the color in here. I do, because quality assurance, making sure that it's really going to be a blue color. I'm going to set my width to 100%. Alrighty. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop down here, and I'm going to reference my navigation unordered list, and then I'm going to set the navigation active unordered list. And then that way, within our navigation unordered list, whether it be active or not, certain things will be in effect and others will not. So let's do nav ul, nav active ul. Now inside here, we're going to set the position. So we set position to absolute, meaning it can go wherever it fits perfectly to where it thinks it can fit. Now I'm going to set my padding to 20 pixels. I'm going to set the background to a solid black. I'm going to go ahead and add a border around this. That way they can see that there's going to be a border inside, on the outside of my navigation element. So if I set my border to 5 pixels solid, let's do white. No, let's not do white, because I'm going to do that for my list item. Let's do red. Now, another thing I want to do is I want to set the right and the top. So instead of like on the header, how we had it to the left top, I want to set it to the right top. So I'll do right at 20 pixels. 20 pixels. And I'm going to set my top to 60 pixels. That way it'll be 60 pixels from the top and 20 from the right. Now another thing I want to do is I want to make sure that it's going to stretch 100% all the way across the screen, just like our header. So the width equals 100%. Now I'm going to give it just a little bit of flair. I'm going to set my border radius. I'm going to set this one to about 20 pixels. Now I'm going to set my display. For most of you out there, you probably think my display would be something like inline block or block. And if that's what you're thinking, you're wrong. I'm going to set it to none. Don't want to show it, because this is the unordered list in the navigation. We want to display the list element. So let's go ahead and do our nav li, which is navigation list item. So what I want to do here is if we was to save this right now, and then if everything actually worked, then the list item text would actually be nested on the left side, like you'd be reading a book. I want my text to appear directly in the center. So if I do text align center, I also want my list items to stretch all the way across and match my unordered list in my navigation. So let's do width equals 100%. Another thing that I want to do is I want to set another padding inside here for 10 pixels. You'll realize that padding and margins helps you get space away from the words or the elements. And this basically just helps with the reading and visibility of your website. Alright, so now we have our padding. Now let's go ahead and give it a border. So let's do border 4 pixels, solid, and this one's going to be white. Now let's go ahead and give it a margin. Let's do margin 0, and then we're going to call it margin bottom. And we'll set this one to 10 pixels. So that means at the bottom of every list item is going to be 10 pixels before another list item can start. Alrighty. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do our nav hover list item. Even though this is in our mobile responsive view right now, if they click on the three little vertical lines, we still need a hover effect just so it can figure out, so we can get it set up. But surprisingly, this is going to be display block. That's it. That's all I need. Now, what I want to do is I want to give my A element some class, because inside of my media function, the A element just is the default blue underline. So if I do A, I set that color to blue. Then I want to set my font size to, let's see, let's assume we're looking at it on a mobile phone. 25 pixels should be decent. I want to set my font family. I want to set that to fantasy as well. And now if I save this, I should, in theory, refresh my browser and then click on this, and everything's still the same. Alrighty. So if we're coming over here and we go to refresh right quick. If I sit here and open this up, what my issue actually was that this was not separated. So I had to create the and, had to set my and attribute. But yeah, spacing. This is how tricky CSS can be. Because if I was to keep this back here, refresh this page, and then call that, then it doesn't do anything. It just sits there. That's because my and attribute, the and function actually, it just wasn't there. So I didn't know what to do. Now if we refresh, here's this, our three little vertical lines. And if we call that, we get our home, our about, our contact, and our services. About. We forgot to put header on our about page. Alright, so